and welcome back. And before we begin our lecture today, I would like to introduce you to Better Life Counseling. Our friends at the Better Life Counseling provide services dealing with emotional and mental health, such as depression, addiction, anxiety, dealing with trauma, love, marriage, career, and also helps you find meaning and purpose to your life. These services, which you or your friends or anyone who may need it, can be availed in person or online by calling the number on your screen. The contact information for appointments is also given in the description below. Our friends at Better Life Counseling are there to help you find and make a better life. I hope you make use of this service. Okay, so here we are. Now, we shall begin with our ongoing discussion, with our ongoing lecture on Socrates. On Aristotle. Okay, so here we go. Now, what do we say? Or the thing is, from our previous lecture, it was made clear to us, and it is quite clear to all of us, that Aristotle is quite interested, and he puts an emphasis on the reality of the world, on the existing things rather than the abstract. And this is what differentiates him most from his predecessors, such as Plato and Socrates. Now, before we start, I would like to remind all of you once again that it's erroneous, right? Wrong. It is quite wrong. It is quite erroneous to have a literal understanding of Aristotle. In other words, when we literally read Aristotle's Politics, much of what he says in Aristotle's Politics, if you read it literally, will not make sense. In fact, if we take everything, when we do read Aristotle's Politics literally, then what Aristotle states, right, his argument seems quite outdated and irrelevant. Imagine he talks a lot about property, to be a citizen, all these things, which is irrelevant in today's context. However, we must understand that even if his examples which he uses in order to illustrate his underlying assumptions or the essence of his argument, even though those examples may be outdated, the essence or the main assumptions of his arguments still remain the same, and they are even more relevant. And when we read the great philosophers, the Greek philosophers, for instance, or the Western philosophers, we must try to, in a sense, because we must try to make sense. We must try to, in a sense, remove all the examples which is not relevant nowadays, but then try to concentrate and understand the main essence, the foundations, the key foundations, or the key essence of their reasoning, of their arguments. And that is what gives them, these thinkers, the power, right? In other words, for instance, when Aristotle speaks of the pure and the perverted form of government, right? So for him, he differentiates forms of government into two categories. You have one category which is pure, i.e. good, and the other one which is perverted, which is bad, right? So in the good category, he places, if you have read it, and I do hope that you have read it, in the good category, Aristotle places the best form of government as monarchy, kingship, and then the next best is aristocracy, and the next best is constitutional polity, right? Those are the three best forms of government. And on the other hand, in the other column, you have the perverted form of those best forms of government. In other words, the best form of government is kingship, right? And the worst form is tyranny. So the opposite of kingship is tyranny. So tyranny is the worst form of government, right? In contrast to kingship. And the next best, i.e. aristocracy, is the good form, the pure one. And the perverted form of aristocracy is you have oligarchy, right? You have oligarchy, which is the perversion of aristocracy. Now, the next best to aristocracy is the constitutional polity, right? The constitutional polity, or mixed constitution. And the perverted form of that form of government, i.e. Constitutional polity, is democracy. So democracy is the perverted form of constitutional polity. In other words, he ranks them accordingly, right? So you have democracy. So you have the best. So the best is according to ranking. The first best is kingship. The second best is aristocracy. The third best is constitutional polity. And on the other side, on the other column, you have the perverted form of kingship, which is tyranny. The perverted form of aristocracy, which is you have oligarchy. And the next best and the perverted form of constitutional polity is democracy, which is the perverted form of the mixed polity. Now, when we read all those things, I mean, it seems quite irrelevant, right? I mean, it seems okay, but then if you literally read what Aristotle says in politics, then much of what he says will not make sense, and much of what he says is quite irrelevant, right? It's quite irrelevant. Now then the question becomes, so how do we understand Aristotle, right? What makes his ideas so powerful? What makes his ideas even more relevant today, now, even so more than before? Now, the answer is quite simple. Now, you have to understand the essence, the basic assumptions, the foundation of his thoughts, right? From the key message behind his philosophical ideas. If you try to understand that, then everything makes sense, right? That's how we should be that's how we should approach the readings of Aristotle or the readings on Socrates and Plato, right? This is how we should do it. Because one of the main weaknesses, or one of the key limitations, or the wrong way of understanding these great philosophers, or any great philosophers, is that nowadays many of us tend to have a literal understanding and a literal reading of those great philosophers. Thus we get the wrong impression, the wrong ideas about what they actually say, or what their ideas really are. Because when we have a literal understanding of these philosophers, once you have finished reading their work, you are left with, okay, this is all outdated, so what, right? That becomes your impression. However, when we do understand the essence of their message, the essence of their philosophical understanding, of their philosophical arguments, then it makes sense, right? So this is what we're going to do. This is what we will try to expound upon in today's lecture. Okay, so now that all these things are clear to you, let's move on, right? So to properly see this is where we are, getting into the meat of Aristotle's politics, and this is what I want you to understand. We will not deal with, unlike all the other lectures on Aristotle's politics, which you will find numerous in YouTube and even in your own universities and colleges, which are quite stupid, right? Literally quite stupid. We are not going to fall into the same trap. We are going to do justice to the ideas of Aristotle's politics, and this is how we're going to do it, right? So follow me, right? So for Aristotle, to properly understand a regime, or to properly understand a society, right? Because you must understand that for the Greeks, right? For the Greeks in general, and especially for Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, when they speak of the politics, right, it is in relation to the city-state, right? But when we speak of the city-state, we do not mean that, when they speak of the city-state, you must understand that when they speak of city-state, they are speaking of their society, not just their society, but the very they are speaking of the very essence of their community, right? It is their life, right? It is, in a sense, it is the city-states or the society in which they live that molds them. It molds them, it structures them, right? They are, in a sense, they provide, it is their way of life. That's the best way to put it. It is their way of life. City-states are, or politics is the way of life. It is a plan of life, directing towards something good. And you must understand, it is the very essence of life itself. It is their very identity, right? So, for Aristotle, when they speak of understand, when you try to understand a political, a form of rule, a system of rule, right, or a state, or a regime, it is very essential to observe not just the laws or the forms of government or the constitution. It is very important, he says, that we should try to understand the habit of the people. Now, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to, take home. You see, he is saying that, yeah, it is, in order to understand the form of government, right, in order to understand what the government is, it is not enough to just observe what kind of law they have or the forms of government a society has. Rather, you should observe the habits of the people in the society. Then you'll understand better why you have such form of government, right? And then you see, the thing is this, because the reason why he's saying this is because he wants to, because for him it is like I discussed last time, that he is trying to deal with the realities of the existing things, not some utopia, not some abstract ideal which is not tenable here in this existence. However, he's trying to figure out, or he's trying to come up with some standards of life that is achievable, right? Some standards which are achievable, which are actually quite attainable, which most men are able to share, and then the standard which most men are able to share, and also a standard sort of regime which is most possible for most societies, right? He's more practical in this sense, right? He's not that, his standards are not so high. His standards are not so high as compared to Plato and Socrates, because Plato and Socrates, their standards are so high that it is not tenable. What they say is not tenable here on earth or here in this existence. However, for Aristotle, his standards are a bit lower, but however, it's lower because it makes certain call of the society attainable and achievable. He's more practical, because for him you have politics, or people practice politics, because for Aristotle politics is practical science. The whole basis, right? The whole foundation of politics is to seek and find not just what is the most absolute best regime, right? The whole idea behind politics is not to find what is the best regime, but the whole basis of politics is that what can we is to attain and achieve, or like in order to make how do I put this? In order to bring to fore, right? To make attainable, to make achievable, to bring to fore, like what can we do? What can we expect, right? What can we expect under ordinary circumstances? Some ideal which can be attainable under any ordinary circumstances. In other words, what can we do with what we have? Given such and such societal conditions, what can we do with these conditions, right? How can we best make use of the conditions we are given, so that instead of creating some horrible, tyrannical, authoritarian form of government, which makes life miserable for everybody, how do we best make use of the given circumstances, so that instead of having a tyrannical government, we have a form of government which is better than the tyrannical, and also which is most and also a form of government which is most possible given the circumstances in which we live in, right? That is the whole point of politics. That's what that's what Aristotle is saying. He's saying it is not enough. It would be wrong to say, it would be imprudent to say that we have to achieve the best in any given circumstances. He says no. You must understand, Aristotle says, the whole basis of politics, and the whole basis of why we study politics, or the whole basis of why people are leaders or statesmen or politicians, is that given the circumstances that you are in, whatever circumstances, good or bad, try to make the best use of it, right? Try to, it's like there's this saying, right? The old proverb, make lemonade, when you're given lemon or lime, make lemonade, like that. Whatever circumstances you are in, that you are given, try to make the best use of that circumstances. That is the whole basis of politics. That is why politics is a practical science. Okay, so that's what it is. Why? Because why do you think? And then why is he emphasizing so much on truly understanding the political regimes or the political form of government, or various kinds of government that you have? Why? Because for Aristotle, the regime or the government, the form of government that you have, the form of rule that you have, the type of government that you have, the government, whatever government you have, whatever state you have, whatever form of rule you have, they represent the soul of the society, right? In other words, the kind of government that you have gives your society its character, right? Its character. Now, pay close attention to what I'm saying right now. It has a huge implication. What he's saying is this: the type of government you have in your society gives your society its character and its life, right? Now, this is very interesting, right? It is very interesting. Of course, we can go on discussing one sentence from Aristotle, and we can spend the whole semester talking about that, right? But no time for that. However, I want you to know this, like, when he says that the form of government that you have in your society gives your society its character. Very simple. For instance, right, if you have whatever form of government that you have in your society tells a lot about the society itself, right? It tells a lot about society. For instance, if you look at the form of government that we have in India, right, you have, for namesake, on paper we have democracy. So now we have this democratic form of government. However, how does this democracy function? This big democracy in India, how does it function? It functions along communal lines, right? It functions along communal lines. So, in other words, you can understand, okay, well then, what Aristotle is saying is that, that means India is a very communal country. And truly, and it is right, he is right, India is a very communal country, right? We are. India is a very communal country. It is divided along the line of religion. It is divided along the line of caste. It is a highly divisive society, right? It is a very fragile country. And the government of India is an example. The government of India gives the Indian society its character, right? So you see, so that's why Aristotle says it's very important to understand the habits of the people. Imagine this. So that is the reason why he says it is essential. In order to truly understand the government, whatever government that you're examining, you must understand the habits of the people. And by habits of the people in India, for instance, you may say, very communal, very, very communal, very, very racist, right? Very racist. That's why India is a communal country, right? It is divided along the caste lines. India is a very racist country, very communal, divided along lines of culture and race, and also caste, and also religion. So, in order to truly understand the government of India, or if you're studying Indian democracy, then you must understand the habits of the people, the social conditions, circumstances, the economic, cultural, political circumstances of the country. Then you will truly understand the Indian democracy and what it claims to be. You see, so that's why, and this is very, very interesting, right? This is very interesting because you see what he is saying, and if you have read what Aristotle had been saying, had been arguing for the longest time, is that, you see, what he's trying to say is this, simply this. Because there's no point trying to, it's very easy and it's very convenient for me to say, for instance, how do I put this? Go through the readings of Aristotle literally, right? I can do that, but then you as a listener, you as someone who wants to learn, will be wasting your time, right? And it would be unfair to you and also unfair to Aristotle if I do that. Rather, what I'm going to do and what we have been doing so far is to give you the essence, the real meat of Aristotle's political philosophy. And that's why we are trying to understand the essence of his things. And if you understand this, then you will literally have no problem understanding the philosophical ideas of Aristotle. Alright, so here we go. Nevertheless, okay. So as we're dealing with book 4 of Aristotle's Politics, you may understand, if you have read it, he goes through, if you have read the book, you'll find that he goes through so many forms of government, so many factors that goes into a given society or a given form of society or a given form of government and how those are formulated. However, what he's trying to say with all of those things, right? What he's trying to say is simply this. What he's trying to say is this. There is no one size fits all for every society. In other words, there is no one size fits all form of government, right? Do you get the point? You see, what he's trying to say is this. You cannot have one form of government and say that this is applicable in every society in the world, which is not possible as long as we are human beings. As long as the whole world is divided along different cultures, and every society in the world is different in a sense, you cannot have a form of government that is uniform, that is universal to all. It is not possible. You cannot have one size fits all government. You can't. For one society, you need one form of government. For the other, another kind, right? Why? Because the social conditions, right? The social composition, the people that makes it up, the social class that goes into making up the society, all play a major role in differentiating, right? In differentiating, and hence in instituting various forms of government, right? For instance, what he's saying is that because let me try to put this into this context. When Aristotle says that there is no one size fits all form of government or type of government, he is quite right. Because if you just look at today, in today's modern world, there is a crusading, right? There is a crusading goal on democracy, right? Everyone talks about democracy as the best and the only viable form of government, the only viable and only cultured system of government in the modern world, right? Most people in the world, led by the Western European countries and the United States, they tend to view democracy as the unblemished, right? Infallible, holy view on democracy. They think that democracy is the best thing, right? Every culture, every country in the world should be democratic. But then Aristotle is saying, no, you can't have that. It is not possible, right? It is not possible, and we'll talk about why it's not possible later on. But he's saying it is not possible, and he's quite right. Aristotle is quite right, because if you just look at the democracies that we have presently, right? Even among the Europeans and the Americans and the British, you have various forms of democracy. You just don't have one form of democracy. Americans have their own version of democracy which is not applicable and which is not viable in England. The English has their own form of democracy which is not possible elsewhere, anywhere else in the world. Much in the same way, even the Western Europeans, right? The Western European countries, they have their own form, their own idea of what democracy is, which is not very palatable, which is not very useful, or which is not very attainable in America or in England, right? So you see, and even in India itself, India we call it democracy, but look at democracy in India. It is anything but democratic, right? And those who are Indians, you know exactly what I mean. It is anything but democratic, right? So he is quite right. Aristotle is quite right to say that, yeah, you can't have one system of government for everybody, right? Which is true. You can't have that. Because if you look at the numerous, this is not difficult to find, because you have numerous clarion calls on spreading democracy around the world, right? As though democracy is the only viable form of government in the modern world. However, Aristotle is saying, you are a fool to think that you can have democracy in every country in the world, which is not possible, right? These insights are extremely relevant today, right? They're even more so than ever, right? Because nowadays people are going like literally crazy over the idea that every country must be democratic, but in reality it is not. And the reason why it is not possible, and this is what Aristotle's argument is about, and the reason why you can't have one size fits all for every country is because the reason why you can't have democracy for every country in the world is simply because of the social composition, right? Of the social composition, the culture of the society, the economic factors, right? In other words, every society is composed of social class, right? Social composition, the number of people in it, the number of male to female ratio, the number of older people, the number of class divisions, right? The number of social class that you have, right? So every society is divided along so many lines, and you have so many factors, and because every society is different in any of those factors, right? In any one of those factors, it makes a huge difference, right? It makes a huge difference as to what form of society, as to what form of government each society will have. And because no two societies are alike, hence you cannot have the same form of government everywhere else in the world, right? For instance, the American form of democracy is not palatable, and the Europeans will outright reject American form of democracy. Why? Because there you go. Like Aristotle says, various factors, social composition, right? Factors that goes into making the society. Much in the same way, the European idea of democracy will be outright rejected by the Americans. Much in the same way, the Indian democracy will be outright rejected by the Americans and by the Europeans, right? It's simple. Look at India, and for instance, look at India and the United States. India is highly divisive, highly fragmented, right? The social composition, right? The caste system, the religion, the number of population, the ratio of male to female, the ratio of older generation to younger generation is extremely different between the two countries, between the United States and India. That's why what works in India will not necessarily work in the United States. Much in the same way, for instance, because we are here in the Northeast India, for instance, if you take the state of Nagaland, right, because we are here, what works in Nagaland will not work in India. And what works in India will not work, and it is not working here. What works in Nagaland will not work in the United States. And it never will. Much in the same way, what works in America will never work here. And I hope you know why, right? So what he's saying is that those are the things that that goes, and what he's saying is that it is not just, you can't just simply expect that it is, that you have various kinds of democracy. No. What Aristotle is saying is that because you have so many factors and no two society are same in those factors, you will have democracy. Yes, you'll have democracy, but then you'll have various varieties of democracy. You'll have monarchies, and you'll have various varieties of monarchies. You'll have tyranny, but also you'll have various varieties of tyrannies. You'll have authoritarian form of government, but you will not have the same authoritarian form of government, but you'll have varieties of authoritarian kinds of government. And by that, let me clarify the point. You see, if you look at democracy, you have various kinds of democracies in India, in US, in the European Union. You look at Nigeria also. Look at Latin American countries, the democracies over there. It's very different. And say, for instance, look at monarchy. Monarchy, okay, ruled by kings, whatnot. But look at even the monarchies in the Middle East. They differ. They differ greatly. Right? They differ greatly. And even look at authoritarian countries. Yes, but then even in authoritarian countries, you have varieties of authoritarian leaders in the authoritarian form of rule, such as in China, which is different from North Korea, which is different from Cuba, right? Which is different from Venezuela, right? So you have all these various. So what Aristotle is saying is simply this: if you read literally, you will not get what I'm saying. But if you have a brain, and if you are and if you are smart enough and prudent enough and astute enough, then you will know that what Aristotle is saying makes a lot of sense, and it is even more relevant today than ever. You see, so Aristotle takes into consideration, right? He takes into consideration these factors. Unlike Plato and Socrates, because for Plato and Socrates, they simply impose a unified, uniform, universal ideal, right? Universally ideal form of government or form of rule, regardless of the existential realities of the society. For Plato and Socrates, they disregard the cultural or the social composition. But then for Aristotle, he says, we have to look into those things. And of course, that's why he uses an example, right? A metaphorical example, Aristotle, in order to clarify what he's saying, and it has a lot of meaning to it. So that's why Aristotle is saying he uses the metaphorical example of physical training, right, or working out. In modern day sense, it would be like you going to a gym and working out, right? But then he says this, right? He just says, take the example of physical training, where there are whenever you go and train, whenever you work out, right? You go to a gym and then you work out. Whenever you work out, you don't have one type of training for everybody, right? And he's quite right, yeah, because whenever you go to a training, whenever you go to a gym, and whenever you say, for instance, you hire your own personal trainer to put you into shape. The thing is, you don't have. There is no single type of training for everybody. You have training for various kinds of body for various reasons. In other words, what the trying to say is this: there is no single type of training for all. Right? The training or the exercise or the workout depends not only on your body size, right, but also it depends on the utility or the function or the reasons for you engaging in for you to engage in a workout or to go to a gym in the first place. In other words, there is no whenever you go whenever you go to a gym to work out, right? People go to gym for various reasons, right? Not everybody who goes to gym goes for losing weight. Some go to gym to lose weight. Some go to build up muscles for competition, right? Some go to build up muscles just for satisfaction, personal satisfaction. Then some go to gym to lose weight for health reasons, right? Some go to gym or some go to training and do exercises for sports, right? And even whenever you are doing exercises for sports, if you play cricket, the kind of exercise that you do for cricket will be different from the kind of exercise you do as a footballer, right? If you play football, the kind of exercise you do will be different from those who play cricket. Or if you are a basketball player, the kind of exercise you do or you emphasize as a basketball player will be different from a person who plays football or who plays tennis, right? So you see, so Aristotle, using this metaphor of physical training, he says, you see, even when you go for a training, physical workout, the type of training you receive is different depending upon the reasons or justifications as to why you want to work out. Or you can take the example of, for instance, this is my own example, education, right? Education. Whenever you are in first standard or second standard, what you learn in first standard or second standard is different from what you learn when you're pursuing your bachelor's degree or your master's degree. You get the point, right? No teacher will teach you whenever you're in second standard. You don't expect your high school teacher to teach you what you are learning now as an adult. You get the point? So that's Aristotle's point. Same thing, likewise, similarly, Aristotle is saying, similarly, even in politics, right? Politics has to consider all these varieties of conditions that enable certain specific form of government to arise and exist, right? To come out and exist in a given society. For instance, you have nomads in Arabian desert, right? You find lots of nomads in Arabian desert, but then you won't find the nomads in Arctic Circle, right? And in the Arctic Circle, you find Eskimos, but you will not find desert nomads in Arctic Circle. So there you go. So I hope you're getting the point. It depends. So politics likewise has to consider all these various conditions, various factors that enable certain specific form of rule to arise and exist in a given society. In other words, every given society will have different varieties of government. Right. So the kind of government or the type of government a given society has will depend upon social, cultural conditions or the composition, right, the social class of a specific society. And of course, it is a truism, right, that no two society can have the same form of rule. I mean, even among, just look at Americans and the Europeans, same culture, but then look at their idea or their form of democracy. So in politics, in Aristotle's politics, Aristotle uses the word constitution. Now, I want you to know this: when he speaks of constitution, he does not mean he does not mean the constitution that we know today, right? The meaning of constitution that the modern understanding of constitution is the constitution, right? The Constitution of America or the Constitution of India, right? But when Aristotle speaks of constitution, it simply means the arrangement of the society, right? How the society is arranged. That's what he's saying. He does not mean, the modern constitution of India or America or England or whatnot. What he means by constitution is simply how the society is arranged or organized, right? So now, that's why he's very clear and explicit on the fact that, hence, it is up to politics, right? So people involve themselves and practice politics so that it is essential for us to understand and discover like what sort of arrangement is appropriate for what kind of society, right? So this is the key. I mean, this is a very important and essential question asked by Aristotle. For him, it is not enough. It is not enough that that societies will have various kinds of various differing varieties of government, but also he is quite adamant to make us see that we have to be prudent enough to understand that, and also discover that there are various there are various ways in arranging a society depending upon the kind of society that we have. So for instance, like here, for instance, in a tribal society, you'll have a tribal form of government, or you'll have a society which is arranged along tribal lines, right? And if the tribal sentiments are heavy, if people in the society has a heavy inclination towards their own tribe, then you can't have the kind of society, you can't have the kind of system that we find in liberal democratic society. For instance, here in Nagaland, Nagaland is a very highly tribal society, right? Highly tribal society. Among its people, people's inclination towards their own affiliation with their own tribe is highly favorable towards their own tribe. And hence, because this is so, the kind of system that we find in America will never be actually good, or even prudent in Nagaland. Much in the same way, America, which is quite secular and which is not as highly divided along tribal lines, which is not even tribal in a sense, you can't expect America to adopt, or you can't expect the system here in Nagaland to be successfully implemented in America, which is not possible, right? Because the social condition varies. So Aristotle is trying to say is that it is essential to discover like what sort of arrangement is appropriate for various kinds of society, right? So in other words, every society will have every kind of society will have to arrange their own, will have to come up with their own arrangement as to what works best for them, right? In other words, one of the implications is that, in other words, even the law, right? Even the law will differ, because whatever law the society has to be in tandem, has to be in concurrence with the realities of the society. And so Aristotle, he's also trying to make us aware, and he also gives us a heads up, right? He tells us that it is very essential to not just, that is why he says we have to pay attention to the habits of the people, right? And the reason why, and one of the reasons is because he uses the example of this. He says that sometimes a society may be organized like democratically, right? Society may be organized democratically, but then the way it works is more inclined towards oligarchy or aristocracy or whatnot. And sometimes you will have a society which is not arranged democratically, but then the way that society works is more democratic, right? It's more democratic than the one which is legally, or which is designed to be democratic. For instance, this is a very good example. An example of a country or a society which is not democratic, but it functions and it works more democratically, is, for instance, Iran. Iran is theocracy, right? And we all know what theocracy is. Theocracy is ruled by religion, according to religious law. So Iran is theocracy. It's never meant to be democratic. But then the way everything works in Iran is more democratic than, for instance, India. India is very, very democratic. Like in paper, India is the largest democracy in the world. It has its own constitution, the longest constitution in the world, India, right? But then the way it functions, the way it works is anything but democratic, right? It is not democratic at all. If you don't believe me, ask the Indians. Well, ask me. I'm an Indian. I know what it means, right? Or for instance, take Nagaland itself. Nagaland is supposed to be democratic, but then the way the way it works, the way the society functions, is anything but democratic, right? Ask any Naga or any person in Nagaland, right? Any person in Nagaland, they'll tell you, unless they're stupid enough, they will not tell you what it is. But then, if they're honest, they'll tell you, yeah, democracy in Nagaland is just on paper, right? In reality, it's anything but democratic, right? It is full of nepotism and tribalism and whatnot. So there you go. So that's what Aristotle is saying. You see, don't be fooled just by looking at the paper, right? you will never understand what the society is. In order to truly understand what the society is, you must look to the habits of the people, and in order to understand the kind of society, the form of government in Nagaland, you look at the habits of the people in Nagaland. In order to understand the democracy in India, you look at the habits of the people in India, right? So this is a very good. So I hope you're getting how relevant Aristotle is. So the reason why, and the thing is, the reason why Aristotle puts a lot of emphasis on the constitution, or how society ought to be arranged, or what is most acceptable, or what is most preferable, is because, you see, for Aristotle, right, he sees constitution as a way of life. Constitution is, or the arrangement, or the way the society is arranged, signifies a certain way of life for a society, right? So it's not just a way of life, but it is also a scheme. In other words, it is also a plan for life, a plan of life. It is a plan of life for the society. It is a plan which the society directs its attention to a particular quality of life, right? So, regardless of how a society is arranged, regardless of how a society is organized, right, it tells us something about the plan. It tells us something about the way of life. It's something, because for Aristotle, especially, it may not be true now, but I think it is quite true now also. Because the reason why he says that the way society is organized or arranged signifies the way of life of the society is because, you see, because like I mentioned earlier, that for the Greeks, especially for Greeks, the polis is not just a state, not just a society, but it is their life. It constitutes their life, the very center of their being, right? It is the very center of their being, right? It is the town center. It is the downtown of a Greek life. So you can't remove that. So the way a society is organized tells us about tells us something about the way of life of the people in that society. It also tells us what kind of aim or what kind of goal that particular society is geared towards, right? For instance, if you look at Nagaland, right? If you look at Nagaland, the way the state of Nagaland is arranged, if you look at that, you find that so the way the state is arranged is that in Nagaland, whenever you during elections, you vote according to your own tribe, right? You only vote for your own tribe, right? So it tells us something that Nagaland is organized, and then the way of life in Nagaland is tribal, right? And even the plan of life, so in other words, most of our lives for people in Nagaland is geared towards attaining some resources from the state government, right? Or trying to make sure that your tribe or my tribe is more advanced and more richer, more wealthier and more powerful than the other tribes. You see? So just by looking at Nagaland and the form of rule that you have in Nagaland, it tells a lot about the way of life of its people, and also what are the primary priorities of the people in that given society. So this is very, very I suppose you can say this is very, very powerful stuff, and that's why because Aristotle is not he's a powerful and very important giant in Western philosophy because of his thoughts, and another reason why he is another reason why his ideas are powerful is because, you see, he pays a lot of attention to the context, right? The context, and by that, it simply means this. You see, what he's also saying is this: you can't understand society, or you can't make sense of politics, or politics would be wrong if you would be carrying out politics in the wrong way if you were to assume that you see, like if you were to assume that there's no context, like Plato and Aristotle, like Plato and Socrates. So what Aristotle is saying is that sometimes you may have, for instance, if you take the example of democracy, right? How now everybody is saying democracy is the best form of government, and why every country in the world should be democratic. So Aristotle would say, well, You may say that, but look at this. You see, you may want to arrange your society. You may prefer, right? You may actually wish. You may prefer to arrange your society in a democratic manner. But then, if you look at the realities of the society, you tend to realize that okay, maybe democracy is not the right way of organizing a society. Maybe another form of rule is better suited. It's more suitable, right? It's more suitable for this society than democracy. Yes, we prefer, for instance, Iran, right? Iran, a good example. People will say, yeah, maybe we should arrange our society in a democratic manner. Yeah. But then looking at the societal conditions of our society, of our Iranian society, it's better to have a theocracy, right? Right? It's more suitable for Iran to have theocracy, even though the Iranians may prefer democracy. Do you get the point? That's what Aristotle is saying. You may say that it's more preferable to have democracy in the Middle East, right? In the Middle East. But then, for instance, looking at the realities of the societies in the Middle East, it's more suitable to have monarchies or theocracies than democracy. You see, and if Americans or the Europeans understands this, then I suppose there will be less anti-European and anti-American sentiments among the people in the Middle East, right? Most of the people in the Middle East are angry towards Western societies, mainly because of that. Western societies, which are highly developed in the world, right? They tend to think that every country in the world should be democratic. They don't see the reality that maybe in the given circumstances of the societies in the Middle East, maybe democracy is not preferable, right? It's not suitable. I'm sorry. Democracy may be preferred, but then it is more suitable in Middle East to have monarchies and theocracies rather than democracy. You see, so these are the things which Aristotle tries to. This is literally what he's saying in politics. Aristotle, in his politics, there's no point. You can literally go and see. Maybe we should. Maybe you might have read Aristotle's Politics, and then after you have read Aristotle's Politics, you might have thought, okay, this is all irrelevant. I've wasted my time studying about regimes which are not even viable today, right? In other words, if you have thought that, then that means you have misread Aristotle. So the whole point behind Aristotle's Politics is what I just said. Or you look at all these things, not literally, but in a metaphorical sense. Yeah, but you get my point, right? He does not mean you to. It is wrong for you to take into consideration all the. It is wrong for you to understand to have a literal understanding of Aristotle. So, with this we end. Our lecture on Aristotle. Our next lecture will be on Cicero, right? So I look forward to all of you there, and I hope you've enjoyed the lecture on Aristotle. And please don't read them literally, okay? Right. Thank you so much, and have a good day, good evening, whatnot, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much. Bye. Take care.